Hello, I'm Jonathan Darling, Vice President for Education and Professional Development at RCPCH. Welcome to Leading the Way, our podcast series on leadership. And this podcast comes out of our belief that better leadership skills are good for all of us, not just a few, and that we can learn from people's stories and experiences. And how we approach leadership can positively change the environment around us and make a difference for our patients, our colleagues, and the systems we work in. So we hope that as you join us on this and future podcasts, we'll learn together about better leadership. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Emma Dyer. Emma is an ST7 Paediatric Emergency Medicine trainee at the Royal London Hospital. And she's the outgoing chair of the Trainee Committee at RCPCH. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you, Emma. Thanks for joining us today. The first thing I'd like to ask is about how you came to be the chair of the Trainees Committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me. So years ago, through a colleague, I ended up piloting and testing the e-portfolio when it was in its early stages. And it was quite interesting. And then a bit after that, the role of the e-portfolio and curriculum rep became vacant on the Trainees Committee. So I applied for that thinking that it might be quite interesting and try to help make some improvements and improve things around that area. And I ended up getting the role, and I did that role for almost 3 years on the committee. And then towards the end of my time in that role, the chair position became vacant. And it wasn't ever something I'd really thought about doing. Always sort of thought that those kind of leadership positions were maybe for other people. But then a few people on the committee or who work with the committee approached me and asked if I'd be interested in applying. And they said they thought I'd be a good fit for the role. So I gave it some thought and decided to go for it and applied and was lucky enough to be elected. So yeah, it required a bit of prompting from other people, but I'm really glad that they did and that I did put myself forward for it.
And I'm interested in the bit where you said those roles are for other people. That's where you kind of initially thought when you heard about it. Just tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think I'd always sort of thought that leaders or people that were in positions of leadership were people who were kind of maybe a bit louder, maybe quite charismatic, maybe kind of very sociable. And I didn't really see myself as that kind of a person. I'm a bit more of an introvert, maybe a bit quieter. So I kind of didn't necessarily see myself as a natural leader. But I think especially through that role, I've kind of learned that there are all different types of leaders and actually that you can find your own leadership style. My leadership style is not always the loudest, but I think that I do well in terms of, being collaborative and bringing other people along with me and being able to make my points in a, maybe not always a very loud way, but a way that people will respect and listen to because of the other skills that I have. So I think I've learned that you don't always have to be that kind of stereotypical, very charismatic and loud person to be a leader, that there are lots of different types of leaders and you can find your own way of doing it and that can be just as successful.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that you first did that role of, was it e-portfolio rep? So that is on the Trainees Committee.
Yeah, that's part of it.
You were part of that committee for a few years?
Yeah, I think almost 3 years in the end before I did the chair role, yeah.
And do you think that was important or helpful in preparing you for the chair role, or would it be easy to step into it without having done that?
I think it was definitely helpful just in terms of kind of those relationships, getting to know people within not only the committee, but within the college team, the wider kind of volunteer roles, and knowing kind of how those processes worked, how things at the college worked, meant that when I did step into the chair role, there was still lots to learn, but I at least had a kind of basic grounding in how those things worked and who the people I was going to be working with were. Because I think in a role like that, it's all about relationships. It's all about being able to work well with the people around you to get stuff happening.
And going back to that first role, the e-portfolio role, just say a bit more about why that appealed to you or what drew you into doing that.
I think, any trainees who are listening will probably sympathise, especially when the portfolio that we currently use first was brought in, because I've been a trainee for a while. It wasn't always great. And I think we were very keen to spend a lot of time complaining about how terrible it was. And I thought, well, actually, maybe this is a chance to try and make things better and actually do something about the complaining rather than just complain. So I think that was the thing that drew me to it, that maybe it was a chance to, make a bit of a difference and try and improve things for trainees in a small way.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting where leadership, you can think of it as trying to make things better for our patients, for our colleagues, for the system. And that was your first step in a way. And then that led on to being the chair of the Trainees Committee. And just looking back on your time as chair of the Trainees Committee, how has that been? Is it overall positive, or has it been difficult, or what are your reflections on it?
Oh, definitely positive. I've loved doing the role. I mean, it's been challenging at times. It's a really busy role and there's a lot of juggling to try and fit everything in, especially around work. And whilst doing the role, I had a baby, so another thing to juggle it around. But it's been a really, really great role, very fulfilling, very interesting, loads of amazing opportunities that I would never have got the chance otherwise, to be in a room with really interesting people who are really passionate about what they do, and also with people who have power to actually make changes happen. And I get to be at that table kind of trying to put the trainee voice across or make the case for paediatrics or whatever it may be. So yeah, it was great. And I got to work with a bunch of amazing people as well. I mean, the other trainees that are on the committee, there's such a brilliant bunch of really committed, passionate, inspiring people. I mean, it was a joy to be able to chair that committee. And then also the team within the college. I mean, I got to know so many of the college staff who, again, are just so great to work with, really genuinely care about the lives of trainees and trying to make things better, really care about children and young people and their experiences. And to get to kind of work with those groups of people was, amazing.
And can you just give a bit of insight into things you've been particularly involved in doing over the period of your term?
Wow, yeah. It's hard to, when you look back on it, remember everything, but there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on. I mean, obviously, when I first became chair, we were just transitioning over to Progress Plus. Mm-hmm. So there was kind of all the work around that, making sure that the transition was as smooth as possible. And then when there were bumps in the road, trying to work to, iron those out in the best way that we could. We've done lots of work around the training charter, which is kind of owned by the Trainees Committee. So we've made updates to that. And then within that, we've looked recently more specifically around issues with SPA time. We know that lots of trainees are not getting access to it. So we've developed resources and things to try and improve that. Through that, we've also run a national training charter survey to see how that's being adhered to throughout the country and where improvements need to be made, and we've now got a working group looking at taking that forward. We've done lots of different work. There was one of our amazing reps in our committee, Gemma, was really passionate about writing some guidance around pregnancy loss and fertility issues for people in training, but actually applicable to anyone really in the health service. And with her leading that, we set up a small group. We wrote this guidance and then we were able to get it approved as an official college policy, but actually also we took it to the Academy of Royal Medical Colleges, and they also have now published it through their website. So hopefully that document can be accessed by any specialty now, not just paediatrics. So it's another piece of work that I'm super proud of and amazing to come out of paediatric trainees. This one trainee in particular who was leading the way on it.
Yeah.
So there's been loads of stuff, really varied things that we've been able to do. And at the moment, we're doing a lot of work with the college and other work streams within the college, looking at the exam and assessment strategy and how we're going to develop that for going forward. So loads of stuff going on, and I'm sure I could go on with much more, but take up the rest of the podcast.
It's great to get that sense of some of the things that you've been able to accomplish. And just to give me a sense of the Trainees Committee, how many people are on it?
It's a great question, and I probably should know the exact number. I think we number around 30-something now, because we have all our regional reps. So every region across the 4 nations has a representative, some regions more than one, depending on the size. So then we have all the regional reps, and then we have the kind of more subject-specific reps. So we've got some less than full-time reps. We've got recruitment rep, exams rep, e-portfolio rep, EDI rep, digital rep. I'm going to miss people off. But then we've got the chair and the vice chair as well. So there's lots of different people. We've now also got an academic rep as well. So it's quite a big committee, but I think it's important we have that representation from across the whole training body.
And does that bring challenges in terms of how you represent the voice of so many people? I mean, obviously you're representing all trainees, but that's quite a big group in your committee to bring together. Do you find that's difficult?
Yeah, I think it can be a challenge at times. I think I'm always really keen in the meetings that we have to make sure that everybody kind of gets a chance to speak, that wants to speak, so that we are making sure we hear everyone's voice. I think, especially being across the 4 nations, that things can be experienced quite differently in different areas. So making sure that we bring all of that in I mean, we're all on different contracts. So, obviously the people who are in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland have a different contract to those in England. So, trying to make sure that we remember that and represent everybody is really important. But I think one of the things that has made it easier in a way is that the college, and I didn't know this before I started working with the Trainees Committee, but at our college, the trainee voice is really embedded at every level of college life. So in my role as chair, I was part of the executive committee of the college, as well as the college council, the education and training exec. And in every committee within the college, there's usually a trainee rep, or at least space for a trainee rep. So that voice is not just the trainees committee, that voice is embedded throughout the college, all the way up to the most senior committee within the college. So there's always a trainee voice in the room, which I think is so important. And that's been really amazing to see and be part of.
Yeah, it certainly struck me in my role how well the trainee voice is represented. And just on when you said about trying to make sure everyone's voice is heard, how practically do you do that?
I don't think I've got it perfect by any stretch. I don't know, I'm always aware in meetings. I remember when I first joined in my role that I would hardly ever put my hand up and say stuff in a meeting because it always seemed a bit intimidating. So I'm always aware that there might be people that feel that way. And I think a lot of our meetings are remote. So there's different ways people can get involved. And actually, some people maybe feel more comfortable using the chat function rather than speaking up. So to make sure there's kind of different ways people can feed back and that we kind of look at all of that, I think can be helpful. I found when we have in-person meetings, sometimes breaking people up into smaller groups so that people can have a more informal discussion, and then feeding back in means that people that maybe aren't so happy speaking up in a big group might feel comfortable to speak up in a smaller group, and that gives more voices a chance to be heard as well. And we also have WhatsApp groups and stuff where we can bring up issues and feed stuff back in between meetings. I don't know if that's the perfect way of doing things, but that's the way that we've tried to make it work. But yeah, it's something I'm conscious of because I know that sometimes that used to be me that was the one that was a bit unsure about speaking up in a group. So I'm always trying to be aware of that.
I'm sure the first step is to be conscious of it, and then you can think of ways to address it as you have.
I hope so.
Going back to what you said about it's a busy role, and then you said you've had a baby as well.
Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on how people might be thinking, well, it's busy enough doing your paediatric training job, never mind taking on a college role, never mind having a baby. How do you actually combine all these things? How's that worked out?
You just kind of do it. I mean, obviously, I did the role through maternity leave, which actually in the beginning was quite good in a way. I think this was my first baby, so it was a big shift to go from, working and being really focused on your career and your rota just running your life to suddenly having no work and this tiny human to look after. And actually having the college role and that little bit of structure and that little bit of keeping in touch with the medical world, I think for me was quite a good thing and maybe helped keep me a little bit sane in those first few months of maternity leave. Might not be right for everyone, but for me, I think that was actually quite good. It was a juggle, and I'm not going to lie, towards the end of the role, I was sometimes trying to join meetings with an almost 2-year-old who was trying to burn the house down, and was quite a different challenge than when you've got a newborn baby that will, generally just be happy to be held or sleep or whatever. It was a juggle, and I think I found, especially when I went back to work, then juggling college stuff with my family life, with my rota, it was difficult. But at the same time, I think it taught me a lot of important skills. So I learnt to be a bit better, although my husband would probably disagree, but I think I learnt to be a bit better at putting boundaries in, managing expectations a bit more, about when I might be able to be available or when I might be able to get something done by, and being a bit more careful around that, I think. And also I think, in a way, having a baby and making sure I needed to give him and my family time meant that when I was doing work or college stuff, I was kind of more focused on it and more present because I knew that I've got limited time now to do this bit of my life because then I need to go and be with my son or whatever it is. So I think in a way it kind of made me more present and more focused when I was doing that. But it's definitely a juggle. But then I think, again, it's really important that we see women in leadership roles, but also women with families and also men with families who are still very present fathers at home to show people that it's possible to do that. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It does require a lot of organisation and juggling. And there are some things that I'm not able to make because I don't have childcare that day and that's just how it is. But I think it's important that we can show people that we can do that. And actually being at the college has been great for that because, as you might imagine, quite child-friendly.
Yeah.
And so my son, poor thing, has basically been brought up at the college and has come to many meetings, and he's been to a conference where they've got an amazing creche that he had a great time at. You know, I've been made very welcome in meetings where I've been breastfeeding, or they've provided a room that if we needed to go and have a bit of quiet time, he could go to. There's even a widening participation fund, which will help fund costs of, you know, additional childcare if you need it to make meetings and things like that. So it's a much easier place to, I think, to do that than maybe other places. And I think that's been really lovely to see. And I know other trainee reps with small children have taken advantage of those opportunities as well.
Oh, it's good to mention those things. Is there anything else along those lines to mention that helps when you're trying to juggle family life and college commitments, work commitments?
Being organised is helpful. I mean, you have to, you know, plan everything in advance. Having a supportive family also helps. I've got a very supportive husband and wider family. I'm really lucky with that. But yeah, I think you can do it. It's hard, and I'm not saying it's without sacrifice, and it may not be for everybody, but I think it is possible. And I know for me, like, I've got a little boy and I want him to grow up knowing and seeing that women can do important things and be in positions of leadership, and it doesn't have to be men or people that don't have children or whatever. I think it's important to kind of model that as well.
Going back to your earlier comment when you said you wouldn't think you would do that role, it's not for you. As you look back now, you obviously have done it really well and it's been very positive for you too. What would you say to somebody else who's looking at a role and thinking, I couldn't do that? How do you make the step?
I think the more you do these kind of roles and meet people who do these kind of roles, the more you realise that actually everybody who does leadership roles to some extent has a bit of imposter syndrome. I think most people I've spoken to in leadership roles have a little bit of that to some extent, and maybe some more than others. But I did a really interesting exercise when I came back to work after maternity leave. Through the support program, I got some free coaching. And one of the things, the exercises they made me do was to reflect on some times that I could identify where I felt that I'd thrived in a work environment. So I did that and I came up with a couple. And then when I look back at them, they all had like a similar theme, that they were all times when I had to do something or I did something that felt quite out of my comfort zone, that maybe I was a bit anxious about or a bit nervous about doing, but then had all been times that actually I felt in the end that I'd thrived at. And I think that gave me a bit of confidence to kind of embrace opportunities that initially made me feel a bit nervous or I thought were a bit daunting, because I knew from doing this exercise that actually they were often the times when I found that I actually thrived. And I think sometimes pushing yourself a little bit out of that comfort zone can provide you with opportunities and experiences that you just didn't think maybe you could have or that were for you. And I think that's given me a bit of confidence to maybe try and embrace that a bit more going forward.
So can you just tell us a bit more about that support program that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a program, I think, available nationally to trainees from all specialties, offering resources, but also there's some funding as well available for trainees that are coming back into clinical practice from a time away. And that often could be some statutory leave like maternity leave or shared parental leave or paternity leave, but also applies to people who may have, had some time out to do a PhD or something like that. So anyone that's returning to clinical practice. And you can apply for funding to help with courses or to help your department kind of provide some locums to give you more support in your first shifts back. And there's also resources that you can access as well. So if anyone's interested, you can just Google support program, and it's spelled SUPPO and then capital RTT, and you'll be able to get all the information online.
Fantastic. Thank you. Could you give us an example of one of those things when you were reflecting that you thrived at, but it was outside your comfort zone?
I think it was often things like, I think one of them was presenting at a conference, doing like an oral presentation at a conference, which, public speaking was always something that I found quite difficult and didn't come naturally to me. So that kind of thing always kind of made me feel quite anxious and, do I really want to do this? But actually, when I did it, I was like, oh, okay, like that actually went quite well and I got some nice feedback and maybe this is something I can do. So things like that, I think, were the things I identified where, initially was quite unsure about it, but actually turned out to be something quite positive.
As you kind of reflect on your trainee committee role, what would you say you've learned about leadership that you could share for others to reflect on?
I think I've learned that leadership is often not about you. For me anyway, I think it's often about the people around you and actually what you can get out of them. And I think being able to use your leadership position to give other people kind of opportunities and support them and provide them with the kind of connections that you might have because of your position to be able to go off and do the thing that they are passionate about or really good at. I think that's been really nice. That's been a really kind of positive thing about having a position of leadership. And that's been nice. I think I've definitely learned that you don't have to do leadership in the style of someone else. You can find your way of doing it. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be a good leader. So that's been quite good. And I think the other thing that I've maybe taken away is that I've got this friend who has this lovely saying, and I think it translates something like bloom where you grow. And I think when you're looking at trying to fix stuff, or like you look at the NHS or the world and all the issues that there are, it can feel really overwhelming and you kind of feel like, well, I can't do anything about that. But I think if you can just focus on improving little things in your sphere of influence and kind of leave your little patch better than you found it, whatever and wherever that may be, I think that's a nice goal to have. And I think by taking up leadership positions, it allows you to do that. And it might just be small changes in small ways, but if you can make even a little bit of positive difference, then that is something. And I think that's how I try to look at it. I don't think, I'm going to change the world or fix the NHS or training or anything like that. But if you can just make some small improvements, and if everybody did that, then I think that's not a bad goal to have.
And I think that is leadership. Well, that's a great place to be drawing to a close. Is there anything you'd particularly like to mention as we finish? Some key takeaways?
I think the only other thing I would add is that if you're looking at something and thinking, oh, that's probably something for someone else, maybe have a go, maybe apply and see what happens. And if that thing is, at the college, I would definitely encourage people to get involved. I've had a great experience being involved at the college, and, I think other people would do too. So if that's something you're interested in, or you think might be a nice fit, or even if you think it might not be, have a think about it. And don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there. You never know what might happen.
Fantastic. Well, Emma, thanks very much for the chance to chat today. I think there's lots of really great lessons that come out of that.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this Leading the Way episode from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. The thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast relate solely to the speakers and not necessarily to their employer, organisation, RCPCH, or any other groups or individuals. You can find the transcript of this episode and more from the Leading the Way podcast on our website, RCPCH Learning. Go to learning.rcpch.ac.uk.